The Roman Empire was the peak of Western civilization during classical antiquity, covering all of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. But in the early days of its history, Rome was just one of the many independent cities on the Italian peninsula that sought commercial and financial stability, as well as to secure their supremacy through military might. According to Roman tradition, Rome's era as a monarchy ended in 509 BC, when a group of noblemen overthrew the last king of Rome. The Romans ultimately replaced the king with two ruling consuls, who exercised the same authority and powers as the king. However, they were elected to serve one-year terms. After this period, new candidates would be elected. As Rome spread its influence into further areas, its political bodies proved resilient and adaptable, encompassing neighboring populations, such as the Etruscan peoples who contested territories with the Romans. By 300 BC, the actual political power in Rome was centrally located in the Senate, which at the time included only members of patrician and wealthy plebeian families. Rome fought many battles against its Etruscan, Greek, and Celtic neighbors. It gradually expanded its dominions as it racked up victories. Although the Gauls sacked and burned Rome in 390 BC, the Romans rebounded under the leadership of military hero Camillus, eventually wresting control of the entire Italian peninsula. By 290 BC, Rome had captured all of central Italy. Then, in 272, it conquered the southern portion of the peninsula after defeating the Greeks led by King Pyrrhus of Epirus in the famous Pyrrhic War, where Magna Graecia was routed. Rome still pursued to annex the territory of Sicily, but it was under the control of Carthage, another military power in the western Mediterranean Sea. In 264 BC, Rome fought a string of conflicts against Carthage, a powerful city-state in North Africa. This round of battles became known as the Punic Wars. The First Punic War ended in 241 BC with the Roman victory. It served as motivation for Rome to build a powerful naval fleet, develop new tactics, and strategically use its navy, army, and alliances in Sicily to drive the Carthaginians off the island. During the Second Punic War, Rome managed to halt the advance and defeat the army of the famous Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca. Leading a massive army of soldiers, mercenaries, and even war elephants, he managed to cross the Alps and reach Italy. As the triumphant power, Rome secured total control of Sicily and much of Spain. After the Second Punic War, Rome was already firmly ensconced as the hegemonic power in the Western Mediterranean. The next objective was to conquer Greece, which triggered the so-called Macedonian Wars that lasted from 214 to 148 BC. Rome also spread its influence eastward, defeating King Philip V of Macedonia and turning his kingdom into another Roman province. In the Third Punic War, which ended in 146 BC, the Romans captured and destroyed the city of Carthage and sold its surviving inhabitants as slaves, converting a part of North Africa into a Roman province. At this point in its history, Rome had grown into an empire even before it was ruled by an emperor. With the laying of many roads connecting the empire's provinces and access to trade in many high-quality products and raw materials, Rome became the political, intellectual, and financial center of classical antiquity. Countless caravans traveled many kilometers to bring back all types of wealth and slave labor to supply the high demands of the Romans. The empire's quick expansion resulted in a series of upheavals in the conquered territories and in the power wielded by the Republic, opening an era of internal turmoil and violence. Inequality between rich and poor increased as wealthy landowners drove small farmers off public lands, while access to government was progressively limited to the more privileged classes. Yet, with the accession of Gaius Marius, a plebeian whose military prowess propelled him to the position of consul in 107 BC, Rome began a new phase in its history. Now, generals who excelled in their military achievements were exalted as celebrities. However, Marius's popularity eventually bred disgruntlement among his fellow generals, in particular General Lucius Cornelius Sulla, which led to a civil war for control of Rome. The civil war between Marius and Sulla was fought from 83 to 81 BC. The war ended with a crucial battle outside the city of Rome. Sulla prevailed and made himself dictator of the Republic. Around 63 BC, Marcus Tullius Cicero was elected consul and defeated the conspiracy of the patrician Catilinus, gaining a reputation as one of Rome's greatest orators. During this period of Roman history, the empire already gripped Spain, much of North Africa, almost all of Anatolia, Syria, and Judea. But Rome was an insatiable beast and was still far from being satisfied with its possessions. It planned to further expand its borders. To accomplish this goal, three of Rome's most powerful men came together in a strategic alliance. The young and ambitious Julius Caesar, the heroic general Pompey, and the wealthy Marcus Licinius Crassus formed the first triumvirate in 60 BC. Julius Caesar marched into Gaul. After 8 years of wars and confrontations led by the Gaul leader Vercingetorix, he succeeded in eliminating the Gaul resistance against the Roman occupation in 50 BC. The region remained part of the Roman Empire for the next 500 years. Caesar made his fortune selling thousands of people into slavery, while also selling goods and products looted from Gaul's cities. Caesar's military glory in Gaul, as well as his growing wealth, overshadowed Pompey's authority, who ruled Rome as sole consul. In 49 BC, Caesar and one of his legions crossed the Rubicon, a river on the border between Italy and Cisalpine Gaul. Caesar's invasion of Italy triggered a civil war from which he emerged victorious and as lifelong dictator of Rome in 45 BCE. Less than a year later, Julius Caesar was murdered on March 15, 44 BC, by a group of his enemies led by the noble republicans Marcus Brutus and Gaius Cassius. Consul Mark Antony and Caesar's great-nephew and adopted heir Octavian combined forces to crush Brutus and Cassius. They divided power in Rome with former consul Mamercus Aemilius Lepidus Labienus, an alliance that became known as the Second Triumvirate. This new alliance was short-lived. Octavian and Mark Antony soon became enemies. After the defeat of Mark Antony and his lover Cleopatra at Alexandria in 30 BC, Egypt became part of the Roman Empire. By 29 BC, Octavian was the only ruler of Rome and all its provinces. To avoid Caesar's fate, he was keen to secure his position as absolute ruler, while reinstating the political institutions of the Roman Republic, while effectively retaining all the royal power for himself. In 27 BC, Octavian assumed the title of Augustus, becoming Rome's first emperor. Augustus's rule re-established morale in Rome after a century of dissension and corruption. This resulted in the famed Pax Romana, which brought 2 full centuries of peace and prosperity. During these 2 centuries, Rome instituted several social reforms, won numerous military victories, and allowed literature, art, architecture, and religion to flourish. Unluckily for the Romans, the dynasty of Augustus would produce a string of unqualified or cruel emperors, such as the unpopular Tiberius, the bloodthirsty and unstable Caligula, and Claudius, most remembered for his conquest of Britain, a goal that was not completed until 84 AD. The Augustus lineage ended with the Emperor Nero, whose overspending drained the Roman treasury and ultimately led to his bankruptcy and eventual suicide. The Roman Empire peaked around 117 AD, under the rule of Emperor Trajan. That was a time of peace for Rome. The criteria for choosing an emperor were the qualities of the candidate and no longer kinship ties. Also, during this period, there were no civil wars or military defeats. Emperor Marcus Aurelius's rule was plagued by conflict, including war against Parthia and Armenia, as well as the invasion of Germanic tribes from the north. When Aurelius fell ill and died near a battlefield in 180 AD, he severed the tradition of non-hereditary succession and appointed his 19-year-old son named Commodus as his successor. Commodus's ineptitude brought an end to the golden age of Roman emperors. His death at the hands of his own cabinet triggered another bout of civil war, from which Lucius Septimius Severus emerged victorious. During the 3rd century, Rome experienced a cycle of almost non-stop conflict. A total of 22 emperors ascended the throne, many of them meeting violent ends at the hands of the very soldiers who thrust them to power. Emperor Constantine became head of the empire in 306 AD. He moved the Roman capital to the Greek city of Byzantium, which he rebranded as Constantinople. It would become the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire for over 1,000 years. Constantine made Christianity the official religion of Rome. 30 years after Constantine's death, a partition of the Roman Empire took place, which engendered the Eastern and Western empires. Despite its ongoing struggle against Persian forces, the Eastern Roman Empire would continue to remain virtually intact for the next few centuries. However, the Western Roman Empire underwent numerous internal conflicts, as well as threats from outside, particularly from Germanic tribes established within the empire's borders. Rome ultimately collapsed under the weight of its own empire, losing its provinces one by one. Britannia around 410, Spain and North Africa in 430. Invasions by Attila and his Huns warriors ravaged Gaul and Italy around 450, further weakening the empire's foundations. In September 476, a Germanic prince named Odoacer took control of the Roman army in Italy. After overthrowing the last Western emperor, Romulus Augustus, Odoacer's troops proclaimed him king of Italy, bringing an ignominious end to the long and tumultuous history of ancient Rome.